Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our NParks 1 Million Trees webinar. Thank you all for joining us today on Zoom and on YouTube Live. I am Fung Tze, and I'll be hosting this morning's session, which is held in conjunction with the International Day of Biodiversity, which was on 22nd May. Today, we will explore our forest canopy and learn more about the native wildlife that live in it and sustain it. So it's been more than 1 year since we started the 1 Million Trees movement, and we would like to thank all of you who have been involved and been a part of this nationwide movement. 200,000 trees have been planted, and that is 20% of our 1 million trees that we aim to plant. Beyond planting trees, the 1 Million Trees movement comprises of online activities such as virtual tours and webinars just like this one, so that everyone can learn from home. So do check out our website, trees.sg, and follow us on our NParks social media channels for more updates. My colleague will be sharing the relevant link on the Zoom chat. So from our previous webinar, we have learned that the regeneration of our forests is a long and challenging process. We had Siu Chin and Rachel share with us some methods in which forest restoration is done here in Singapore. Some of these were very successful. But actually, our native animals have always been an integral part of forest regeneration process since way before humans started intervening. So our forests and green spaces provide shelter and food for wildlife. And in turn, this wildlife help with pollination and seed dispersal, and all these contribute to accelerated forest growth and forest succession. Our efforts to plant 1 million trees will be so much more sustainable if we can recruit, so to speak, this wildlife to aid the process. But that means that we also have to plant with our wildlife in mind. We need to understand their needs and their interactions with our forests. And today, we have the fortune to learn more about two very special groups of mammals, bats and civets, and how they are essential part of our forest ecosystem. Representing the bats, we have Dr. Benjamin Lee, Director of Wildlife Management Research at NParks. With the civets, we have Ms. Fung Tze Kwan, Research Associate at NUS Center for Nature-Based Climate Solutions. Both of them will be shedding light on the intricate and interdependent relationships between our native nocturnal wildlife and the forest. So after their sharing, we'll be having a short Q&A sessions. And if you have any questions along the way, please send them to Wan Sing as a private message using the Zoom chat. We'll try to share some of these during the Q&A later. Now, I'm sure we are all looking forward to hear from our speakers, and I shall not hold them back any further. Benjamin and Tze Kwan, over to you.
Hi, very good morning. Can everyone hear me? Okay, great. So yes, thank you everyone for coming to this webinar today on canopy creatures, native wildlife sustaining our forests. This is going to be a two-parter. I will talk first about the bats, and then Tze Kwan would go on to tell you more about the civets. So just a bit of context. I think that that we have gone through quite a ecological transformation in Singapore since its founding. A lot of our forests were actually lost before the 1900s, and here is a present-day map showing the remaining vegetation. I mean, despite losing quite a bit of habitat in the early years, we have managed to safeguard our nature reserves and core biodiversity areas for the last 50 years or so. And thus, we achieved the green spaces and biodiversity that we see today. So our greening journey has come a long way. We are now in a stage of building a city in nature. This is a vision which is one of the 5 pillars of the Singapore Green Plan. And to achieve this, we are enhancing our natural capital island-wide by expanding our nature park network to better protect and buffer our nature reserves, and also to intensify nature in our parks and gardens, and also to integrate nature into our urban fabric. And lastly, we would like to strengthen the connectivity between important green spaces. So we are applying nature-based solutions towards achieving resilience in climate, in ecology, and also in our social fabric. So why canopy creatures? We are not adapted to study, we are not, as humans, we are not adapted to be up in the trees. Here is a picture of me in a glorious Dunham Valley in Borneo, in an 80-meter dipterocarp. Canopy creatures are interesting, but are also very hard to study because it's hard to access the trees. There are, Lewis Emmons actually classified mammals into kind of 5 classes in a canopy, where you have, first of all, the climbers that use claws, like the bears and the jaguars. And then you would go on to things like the civets, or even the pangolins. The pangolins climb trees as well. And then the third category were the leapers. The leapers are like the monkeys, for example. And then you have a 4th category, which are the gliders. The gliders are things like the colugo, all right, flying squirrel. And lastly, we have the bats, which are kind of truly arboreal in the sense that they could access most parts of the canopy, except if they're bulky like the flying foxes, then only the outer side. But for some of the small fruit bats, they can actually get into the canopy. So flying foxes, just to take you back to a note written by H. Henry Ridley, which was the first director of the Botanic Gardens. He wrote in 1930 that in the Botanic Gardens in Singapore, on rare occasions, once in 10 years, they used to come and breed, and there were like 70 to 80,000 at the time that used to occupy the loftiest trees there. So, so in a way, the flying foxes still come to Singapore today, but probably not in that sort of numbers. And I will also talk about, the range, the home range of flying foxes later in the Malay Archipelago. So I'll be talking about bats. What are they? Yeah, they are the only mammals capable of true powered flight. They're incredibly diverse, with about 1,400 species worldwide. They are what I like to call small mammals with big mammal lifestyle. So if you look at this graph here, you'll see that its longevity is almost it's almost as long as an elephant, an India condor. If all things are being equal, they're remarkable in the sense that if you compare a bat to a similar size and a mammal like a forest shrew, the bat would live much longer. But it also has got very little young, and it lives a long life. So, so they're in the order Chiroptera, which means hand wing. Their wings are kind of similar to the plan of our hands, a human hand, except that they've adapted and they've got a membrane over the bones that allows them to take to the air. Traditionally, they were classified as megabats and microbats. But in the new classification, the megabats are kind of grouped with 5 other microbat families. And then the rest of the microbat families form another suborder known as Yangochiroptera. Bats are also unique with the exception of the fruit bats. Most of the other bats are echolocating. An exception is, of course, the family Rosetus, which is actually a fruit bat. that uses very rudimentary echolocation through tongue clicks. But recent research also has found that other fruit bats, like the pentator or the dusky fruit bat, and also the cave nectar bat, uses wing claps to echolocate in the dark. So bats are providers of ecosystem services. They provide supporting ecosystem services in terms of pollination and seed dispersal. The durian is a multi-billion industry, and pollination service from bats account for it's about $117 per hectare per season, and that works out to about $450,000 for a village. And this is from a study in Sulawesi. They also regulate pests. They provide pest suppression services. They provide and they consume up to 600 mosquito-sized insects per hour. And there are lots of studies out there to show that without bats, actually it negatively affects fruit development and crop yield as well. And so it's better with both bats and birds. And then there's a study that shows that bats as agent of crop pest control. Bats protect rice loss, rice meals, and also protect the monetary value, which is beneficial to the farmers and I guess also to the consumers as well. So some other countries around us, they would also collect guano, which is bat droppings. That results in considerable income for some of the villagers. And in terms of cultural ecosystem, there are about 140,000 bat watchers descending to Austin annually, and that contributes a lot of tourism receipts. For a lot of Southeast Asia, some of you might have been to Mulu National Park, where you see the wrinkled-lipped bat streaming out of the deer cave, and that is visited by a lot of tourists every year, and also the different flying fox camps in mangroves that tourists take boat rides into. So bats comprise almost a third of the mammal species in Singapore. We have about 26 species. With the habitat loss in the very early years since the founding, we have lost about 67, almost 70% of the bat species. The forest dependent species showed the greatest decline, of course, and then we have got 26 species in 8 families now, the smallest being the bamboo bat, weighing only a few grams, and the largest, which is actually the large or the Malayan flying fox. And these are the number of the breakdown in number of species. But despite that, we are still adding new species, new country records to our bat list. And here it is, some of the bat residents in our country, on mainland Singapore, is in the offshore islands. Personally, my favorite bat is actually the Lesser Asian false vampire. It's not a blood-sucking bat, despite the name. True vampire bats are only found in the Americas. This bat is actually feeds on large insects and also small vertebrates like frogs and lizards. So for the rest of the talk, I would talk about the theropodids or the oval fruit bats, because they have got a kind of closer association with the plants. And they are bats that are easily recognizable in the field. They've got simple ears and got dog or fox-like face, very large eyes, as you can see over here in the large flying fox, the long-tongued nectar bat, and also the cave nectar bat. And it navigates using primarily eyesight and also smell. But as I've mentioned, some of these, such as a cave nectar bat, also uses wing claps. This is a picture of in a cave not a cave, under a bridge where a colony of the cave nectar bat lives. These three species are still found in Singapore, together with this one, which is probably the rarest resident fruit bat, the dusky fruit bat, found in the artificial caves of Bukit Timah Hill, where it's gated so that the colony is not disturbed. And of course, the fifth fruit bat that we have is actually the lesser short-nosed fruit bat, the most common bat in our urban environment, but it does a very important ecosystem services actually of pollination and seed dispersal. They are found to have recorded in a recent study by Joanna Coleman and Anna Chan's lab that they recorded 33 plant species eaten or in the diet of this bat, and they also disperse some of the seeds in the process. This chart shows the relative importance of the pollination taxa. The bees, of course, wins hands down, but bats are still important, because we need, because there are different types of flowers that cater to different animal groups. For example, a characteristic of bat pollinated flowers, these are large flowers, or rather large aggregation of small flowers, such as Parkia speciosa, shown on the left in this wonderful picture taken by a friend, Nick Baker, where the bat actually helps to pollinate, and you can see all the pollen dust on the body of the bat as it flies away. The flowers are usually robust, and they have to be, because fruit bats are usually large animals, and by foraging in the flowers, they could damage them, so they have to be robust. They're pale and drab in coloration, and there's a nocturnal function, they're open and functional at night, strong nocturnal odor, and unobstructed access to flying animals, or in this case, the bats. So here is a picture of, or pictures of a cave nectar bat pollinating the banana in the urban landscape. Marine turtles photograph is the best. It shows, the bat being coated in pollen in the face before it flies off. This species actually provides an important ecosystem service of pollination for many of our fruit plants. So pollination, doesn't just occur inland, but also on the coast. Here is a Sonoratia alba, I believe, on Semakau Island, and I was, trapping bats there one night, and I trapped a long-tongue nectar bat, and so you can see it's got an extremely long tongue that is adapted to pollination or nectar feeding in the mangroves. The cave nectar bat also participates in pollination of this genus. So bat pollinated plant families, Professor Corner has said that these are usually pagoda trees with terminalia type branching. In his book in his 2-volume Wayside Trees of Malaya, and these are some of the well-known plant families, plant families that are pollinated by bats. You can see, and some of these species are restoration action plan. For example, the Fabaceae for fixing nitrogen, but also as food plants for our native animals. So bats also provide a service as a seed dispersal. This is a very recent review by a colleague, Shima Aziz, and her team, and they have shown that bats can sometimes disperse seeds groups of animals like the elephants and the hornbills. In fact, because so for theropodid bats or the fruit bats, the gut retention time is about 30 minutes to 2 hours, but some of them can actually retain the seeds in the gut for up to 24 hours. And in that time, bats can actually fly a long distance as far as 300 kilometers. So they're pretty, so for the theropus fruit bats, they're very, they are very important dispersers in the archipelago. So in the Malay archipelago as well, and some of the first fruit plants on islands are actually dispersed by these sort of large flying foxes. So this is a study undertaken by Jonathan Epstein and his team in to look at the range of flying foxes. I think they put GPS trackers on 7 animals, and they found that these guys they don't just stay in one place. They actually roam quite a long way, traveling tens of kilometers, and from Singapore to Indonesia, and also from Malaysia upwards to Thailand. So these are bats that with a wingspan of 1.5 meters, and they are capable of very long distance flights. And they would be roaming in the archipelago in search of resources. And plants are also roosting resources of bats. There are a wide variety of roosts. I've only shown the plant roosts, and because of that interrelationship between our animals and plants in our environment. So the roost performs many functions. Of course, it's for protection, and there's also maternal care if they're sharing a roost, information exchange. And most of these are concealed roosts. The most peculiar one is this roost in a pitcher plant that was first reported from Brunei, where a Hartwick's woolly bat is in. You can see that coming out, a picture taken by Merlin Tuttle. And then back in Singapore, we have the bamboo bats roosting in that very narrow opening of about a few millimeters. Remarkable animals. With flattened skulls, and there's an adaptation that they can sneak in and roost in bamboos. This is a picture on top here, right here. It's a picture of a banana frond that is not open, and it houses a family of 3 whiskered myotis. These are bats that are common in the urban environment, and also finally, of course, you've got flying foxes roosting out in the open, and the short-nosed fruit bat roosting under a bird nest fern. It also roosts under palm leaves as well, and in people's houses. So plants are a valuable resource for bats, figs especially. They're kind of for bats. Figs are kind of classified into a Big Bang fig, which doesn't fig very often to this sort of steady state figs. Ficus variegata and fistulosa, which are very common figs in the environment. You can see one on the left, and also a bat feeding on one. Figs sustain bats and also other animals in the rainforest. I also like to add that Peliquium in this list as well. This list is actually found on the NParks website. A list of bat attracting plants that and some of it is actually used for our forest restoration plans. But you can also plant it in a large school garden, or if you have a compound and you like to attract bats. These are some of the plants that you can consider. Pelargonium obovatum is one of such plants, and it's a member of the Chiku family, Sapotaceae. In a recent observation I had, which Tze Kwan will talk about later, there were lots of frugivorous animals coming to the tree, not just bats, but also flying squirrels and civets. So this is one of those important forest trees that we will try to put more back into our degraded forest. So a bit about my field work. How do we study bats or catch them? We will set up a high mist net at the edge of the forest. This is a physical capture method together with harp traps. Harp traps are used in the forest understory in very narrow paths. This mist net goes up to about 8 meters, and that little lit portion is where our processing station is in the forest. I also do acoustic monitoring because it's important to find this is a method that is used to kind of supplement our knowledge of bats that would otherwise not be caught in some of our surveys. And it's important to find out if some of our green infrastructure, such as the eco-link, actually help in the connectivity. You may think that because bats fly, then they don't need any form of connectivity. But for forest bats, connectivity is actually very important, because the bats make use of forested linkages to move around under the cover of the vegetation, because they're not very strong flyers, in the sense that they can't fly right out in the open. So they would need vegetation to protect them as they're flying through the forest. Out of our forested environment. So for some of our researchers, we also use a thermal imaging device to see if there are bats in roost. This is an example of one, a bamboo bat, which has gone into, you can see that, it's brightly lit, showing that a presence of a bat inside. But the part at the internode, it's also quite brightly lit to suggest that could be more than one bat within the internode. So this is a way of us using technology to find out more about bats in our environment. So there are also other, so we didn't talk about, the title was about canopy creatures, but we didn't talk about birds. Some of the birds are also canopy creatures today, because there probably would be another talk that deals with that in our 1 Million Trees talk series. But I would just like to talk about the mention the colugo, which is a fascinating animal to me. It's so unique that it's in an order of its own. And there's still so much that we do not know about its diet. This was taken a few weeks ago when I was watching durian flowers in dairy farm, and there was a colugo there, just hanging out, and so I think further observations are actually needed. Studies as well of our nocturnal animals, and the other one is actually the Sunda slow loris, which studies are underway by my esteemed colleagues from the National Biodiversity Center. So yeah, and I'll hand over for the next part of the talk to Tze Kwan, who will tell you more about civets. Tze Kwan, take it away.
Thanks, Benjamin. Hello, everyone. I'm Tze Kwan. So today I'll be sharing with you about another native mammal that we have in Singapore, the common palm civet, and why they are the gardeners of our forests. So what is a civet? A civet is a small to medium-sized mammal. It is from the order Carnivora and in the family Viveridae. So this group of animals tend to have stripes, spots, and or ring on their body and tail. They have relatively long snout, long tail, and short legs. Civet species can be found in Asia and Africa. Many people call them civet cats, but they are actually not cat or weasel or raccoons. They are more closely related to mongooses and hyenas. So in the past, 9 species of civets have been recorded in Singapore. This includes the binturong, the large spotted civet. However, currently we only have 4 species of civet in Singapore. The small-toothed palm civet, which is quite rare, and their distribution restricted to our nature reserves. We also have the Malay civet, where the last sighting of an individual was in 2012, and the large Indian civet, where the last confirmed record was in 1990s. So there's only one species that is able to survive urbanization, and that's the common palm civet. So the common palm civet can be found in both forested and urban environments, and they are the most common species of civet that we have. So what makes them so special is that it is one of our last wild native urban carnivoran, and you can recognize them by the black facial mask across the eyes and the tail, which is as long as their body, the spots on their back, as well as the relatively short legs. So as we know, the civets are nocturnal. It means that they are active at night, and they are also arboreal. They spend a lot of time on trees, and in urban areas, you can even see them using structures like the fence, the electric cables, and they have a fantastic sense of balance, and it's always very amazing to see how they manage to balance themselves when they are walking on the cables. So they are also great climbers, and you often see them on trees. So here's a fun fact. They smell like pandan. So if you're out for an evening stroll in the neighborhood park and you get a whiff of pandan, but you do not see the pandan plant, you may have a civet that is peering at you from the above. So despite being a common species, the common palm civet, we still do not really know much about them. Regional studies have shown that they are frugivorous. This means that they feed on fruits and therefore may be potential important seed dispersers. But these studies are few and we still need to learn more about their ecology. We started studying this species in 2009 due to human civet interaction cases in the urban space. Together as a team with my colleague Xu Weiting and master's thesis supervisor Mr. Sivyasoti, we have conducted a series of research and student projects in NUS to better understand this species. So studies include understanding their biology, their activity pattern, the food plants that they feed on, their ecological role, and also people's perception and awareness towards this species. So this brings me to the theme of today's webinar on understanding the ecological role of the common palm civet as a seed disperser. So one very important question to ask is the common palm civet an effective seed disperser? So what is an effective seed dispersal? So there are 3 main components. The first is diversity. So ideally, the animal has to feed on a wide variety of fruits so that they can defecate seeds of a wide range of physical traits. Number 2, quantity. The animal should ideally feed on a lot of fruits as well, and as well as the seeds so that they can defecate and disperse a large number of seeds. And number 3, quality. So this means that the seeds has to be viable, able to germinate, as well as the animal should be ideally be capable of long distance seed dispersal, meaning that they can bring the seeds away from the parent plant. So now we need to know, what do civets eat? But the civets are nocturnal, they are active at night. And they're also elusive. So this makes observing them really difficult, especially in forest environments where the civet could be right in front of you on the tree, but you can't even see them. So how do we study diet? Well, what goes in will come out, right? So we study them by their feces. And I get this question a lot. How do you know that this is a civet scat or civet poop? So make a guess. Do you think the civet poop is the one that is black in color, red in color, or orange in color? So actually, all of them are civet poop. So we can generally identify civet scats by the size of them. They can be as long as between 10 to 15 cm, the location where they are found, as well as the presence of civet hair, which is black and white. They accidentally ingest their hair when they are grooming themselves. So I spent many years searching and looking for civet scats, and I have to go to where civets go to. So this includes climbing roof in urban spaces, visiting mangrove boardwalks, surveying the forest trails. And surveys can be long and tiring. And so when we finally see a fresh pile of civet poop, we couldn't resist and we have to take photos with it. So the civet scats were brought back to the lab and we preserved them and we sort the diet items according to their morphological similarities, as well as identify them to the lowest taxonomic level. And to date, I have collected more than 700 civet scats, and this collection is currently in the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum. So what did I find from sorting through all this poop? What I found was that the civets are highly frugivorous. So this means that they eat a lot of fruit. More than 60% of their diet consists of fruits. And I have found at least 41 species of fruits and have recorded more than 26,000 seeds in their scats. So today I would like to share with you 6 main food plant species that the civets feed on that can be found in our forest. At the top of the list is the fishtail palm Carotermites. So the Carotermites fishtail palm is the dominant food plant of the common palm civet. So coincidentally, like the common palm civet, which is a common species yet little known, the fishtail palm is also a common palm which we do not know much about. You can easily see them at the edge of our forest, and you can recognize them by the leaflet which resembles the fishtail. So the fishtail palm fruits year-round, and therefore we think they make an important food source, stable food source for our wildlife, not only for the civets, but other animals that depend on them. The second plant species we have is the false olive, Champerera melinana. So you may find this name familiar. If you are like me, you like to go to McRitchie for a trek. So the Champerai Trail at the McRitchie Boardwalk is named after this species. So what was very interesting was that if you remember, there was a dry spell in 2014 and it triggered a mass fruiting episode of the false olive on Pulau Ubin, and to my surprise, the civet changed. They switched their diet from the Carotermites, the fishtail palm, to this species. And why it gave me such a deep impression was because I collected a record-breaking number of poop, 35 civet poop in a single field trip. Yes, so then we have the third plant species, which is the Ericivae tomentosa. So this is a woody climber. Now is actually the peak fruiting season. So the fruits are red and it matures into a dark black color. And if you're out on a nature walk, you can observe and take a look. We also have the seashell nutmeg. Remember this red color poop because I will come back to this later. And we have the climbing fig. So as what Benjamin has shared with us, figs are a very important group of plant species that support many wildlife. They are known as keystone species. The civets feed on the climbing fig, so the fruits the color of this fruit is orange in color and they are slightly smaller than the size of a tennis ball. You can see them quite easily along southern ridges, especially at the elevated forest walk. And civets also feed on another ficus species, which is the common red stem fig. So yeah, so the figs are very important, and we not only find that civets feed on them, but they also support other animals like the bats, the birds, as well as the primates. And lastly, we have the tembusu. So this is the plant that you see at the back of our $5 note. And I'd like to share with you this is one of my favorite civet photos, thanks to Brian, who shared his sighting of a civet in the tembusu tree in NUS back in 2015. So the civets feed on the tembusu between August to January when they are fruiting, and the fruits are small, orange, and supposedly bitter. So the other animals that also feed on the tembusu includes the bats and the birds. So besides plant species, civets also feed on animal prey. They are omnivorous. So I found bits and pieces of the cricket and grasshoppers, bones and furs of rats, rodents, feathers of birds, as well as mangrove crab when they are found, when the scads are found in the mangrove forest. So now we know what civets feed on, what are the characteristics of these food plant species. So that includes the habit, the conservation status, and the seed size. So using this checklist of the total vascular plant flora of Singapore, I found that the civets feed on mostly native tree and climber species. And in terms of the conservation status, they feed on fruits that are of common species, like the ones that we mentioned just now, the fishtail palm, the tembusu, but perhaps more important or relevant to the conservation of plants, civets also feed on rarer plant species, like the one on the left, which is the fruits of the Canstera radii. It is a native climber of local vulnerable status, as well as the fruits of the centaur, which is a native endangered tree species. And if you remember the red color poop just now, that is our critically endangered seashore nutmeg. So it is also a native tree species. What is quite interesting about it is that it is thought that it is more uncommon on mainland Singapore than on Pulau Ubin. And so it is thought that maybe the civet population on Pulau Ubin may have contributed to the persistence of this plant population on the island. I also measured the seed size. So seed size is important because large seeded plants are usually dependent on large-bodied frugivores as their seed dispersers. And in Singapore, we have lost most of our large vertebrates. And so would the common palm civet be able to contribute to this service? So I measured the seeds and I recorded seeds that are as small as 1 mm, such as that of the climbing fig, to seeds that are as long as 31 mm. So that is also one of the largest seed size that has been documented to be ingested by a common palm civet. And so now we know that civets do disperse seeds of a wide range of physical traits. And not only that, the civets, seeds that were defecated by the civets were also viable. This means that they are able to germinate, and their gut passage can actually enhance the germination rate and the viability of the ingested seeds. In particular, the false olive seems to benefit the most from the gut passage, because from my germination experiments, I found that the germination percentage of the false olive increased significantly after passing through the gut passage. Germination percentage of other plant species was so high, and it can go as high as 93%. And finally, in order to examine how far the civet are able to disperse the seed from the parent plant away from it, I examined the movement pattern of the civet, and that is through the use of GPS telemetry. So this technology and equipment allows me to estimate how far the civets have been moving, and together with other data from my research, I was able to estimate a maximum possible seed dispersal distance of 1.3 kilometers. So taking all of this together, we now know that civets are indeed effective seed dispersers. They are highly frugivorous. The diet consists of a lot of fruits. They feed on a wide diversity of fruits and they swallow seeds intact. There are many seeds found in their feces, and these seeds are able to germinate and they are able to disperse seeds away from the parent plant. So this then allow us to think, so would the common palm civet be an important potential link to forest recovery in Singapore? But there are still much more to uncover on the interdependent relationships between our wildlife and forest. So just now, Benjamin was telling us about the story about the Pelaquum obovatum. So recently, I had the opportunity to observe the common palm civet to be feeding on this fruiting Pelaquum obovatum. And what was even more exciting was that we found the rarer species of the palm civet, which is the small-toothed palm civet, to be feeding on the same tree as the common palm civet. So this just shows that there's still so much more that we have to understand about the seed dispersers in our environment, as well as the predators and the pollinators. We need to understand what is the relative importance of these animals and what are the plants that they are dispersing and pollinating. So moving forward, it will be really important to have a better understanding of the available seed sources and seed dispersers, pollinators in our green spaces, whether there are any limitations of seed arrival in our forests, as well as the implications on forest succession. Furthermore, we know that biodiversity is the basis for ecosystem functions and services. However, we still do not know much about the role of wildlife, as well as the role of wildlife, as well as the species interactions, which are key to self-sustaining and resilient ecosystems. So scientists have also emphasized the importance of placing biodiversity at the heart of the solution for climate change and mitigation and sustainable development. And at the NUS Center for Nature-Based Climate Solution, I'm currently doing research with Professor Koh Lian Pin and colleagues to examine how and why biodiversity can be important for biodiversity conservation and climate change mitigation. And more specifically, I'll be initiating a new research project to examine the link between seed dispersal ecology to forest restoration and its relevance to biodiversity conservation and climate change mitigation. One of the objectives that I will be aiming to look at to build a quantitative understanding of plant frugivore network in Southeast Asia and how that can contribute to more effective nature-based climate solutions. So moving on, now we have a little bit better understanding of bats, civets, and also native wildlife in Singapore. How can we apply this knowledge and what are the implications on forest regeneration and habitat management? So first of all, like the civet, now we found that common species have important ecological role, and therefore they can be important seed dispersers or pollinators. So in one of the studies conducted by Randolph Craig, we placed camera traps on fruiting fishtail palm, and we found 5 species of wildlife to be feeding on the fishtail palm fruits. And they are all common native species. So this includes the common palm civet, mammals like the plantain squirrel, the long-tailed macaque, birds like the oriental pied hornbill, and the pink-necked green pigeon. So in an urban city like Singapore, we now find ourselves with opportunity for habitat restoration with the help of our animals, which could be our potential restoration partners. With the knowledge of feeding ecology and the ability to disperse seeds and pollination, this will also allow us to apply and increase attractiveness of sites with common food plants that could attract species like the common palm civet or birds like the yellow-vented bulbul, who will be able to bring seeds to the restoration sites. And this will also help us to identify and prioritize plant species that may require management intervention if, for example, their seed dispersers or pollinators are no longer around. And so I'm glad that in the Forest Restoration Action Plan, such species like the fishtail palm, which is native, and the dominant food type of the common palm civets are being incorporated in their framework species. The 1 Million Tree movement team has also shared with me that other species like the tambusu and also the critically endangered seashore nutmeg has also been included in the list of plants that they will be planting. And so it will be also very important to connect forest fragments to increase seed dispersal abilities. So on the left, you can see that's the photo of the EcoLink at BKE. This is an ecological bridge that was completed in 2013 to connect the Central Catchment Nature Reserve and the Bukit Timah Nature Reserve that was separated by the Bukit Timah Expressway. So it was not surprising that one of the first animals that used the bridge was the common palm civet. And that's really thanks to Benjamin, who shared this sighting with us back in 2014. And more can be done, and it is really important to protect our forests, restore our forests, and to further enhance ecological connectivity and resilience, which will be really important to protect and conserve our wildlife, as well as to mitigate impacts of climate change. So now I will pass it back to Benjamin, who will share with us more about the plans and the strategies that NParks has and how we can be part of it.
Oh, thanks, Tze Kwan. Yeah, so as part of this city nature vision, we also have other initiatives such as the Nature Park Network, and both in the Central Nature Park or the Central Catchment Nature Reserve, Bukit Timah, as well as the Sungai Buloh Nature Park Network. So it's important to protect these areas, the core areas of these protected areas by having these sort of nature parks or buffer parks. These buffer parks will protect the central nature reserves against development that abut them, but beyond serving as buffers and habitats, this sort of network also provides ecological interdependent habitats for the flora and fauna and nature reserves, and integral to our network of ecological connectivity that is established throughout the island. Because beyond Bukit Timah and Central Catchment, other parks are equally important next to Bukit Timah Nature Reserve, for example, Bukit Batok and Little Guilin. And these nature parks are actually important for forest bats, our colugos and our flying squirrels as well, because in my monitoring exercises, I've actually found forest bats using some of these nature parks, which doesn't have pristine vegetation, but by enhancing or by restoring these sort of nature parks, we actually expand the habitat, that also allows them to, maybe colonize new areas or next to the nature reserve. So we have seen that, there's actually a very strong interdependent relationship between our forest and wildlife. Just as forests can help support our wildlife too can help sustain the forest through improvement of gene flow in some of our plants. So I will now hand it back to Tze Kwan. Tze Kwan, the next slide, right? Yeah. So if you want to find more about our flora and fauna, you could go to our seed bank or the Botanic Gardens, and also our Natural History Museum, which gives a very very informative trip with the exhibits that are very carefully curated of our natural heritage. So you can make a difference. Join us, volunteer in our 1 Million Trees movement by restoring the environment. Usually in these sort of trips or tree planting, we'll teach you about soil preparation, sapling protection, and also monitoring. So it would be nice to visit your trees every now and then to see how they are doing. We need all your help to protect our biodiversity.
Yep. Yeah, so for the NUS Cats, we are also recruiting team leaders to participate in the restoration projects that we are working closely with NParks. So with that, thank you for listening to us, and we would like to pass it back to Boting.
Thank you, Tze Kwan and Benjamin, for your sharing. So I now know that certain species that we have included in our planting scheme, for example, Parathum obovatum, are actually very important food plants for bats and civets. And I also know that I have the bats to thank for my favorite durians. Now, I'm sure that some of your curiosity has been piqued by the sharing, so let's move on to questions and answers. We'll extend the session by a bit to accommodate some of the questions we have received. We may not be able to cover every submitted question, but nonetheless, thanks for everyone who have submitted the questions. So to start off, what got the both of you into studying bats and civets respectively? Maybe Benjamin, you can go first.
Yeah, so I actually got into studying bats through the nature reserve surveys in the 1990s. I left it for a while because zoology is so interesting, the natural world is so interesting, and I went on to other animal groups. But I returned in 2013 when I started my PhD. I thought maybe it's time to look into the urban ecology of our bats using an acoustic approach. Yeah.
For me, I was an eager undergrad student who only wanted to study mammals. So when I approached my honors supervisor, Mr. Sivasoti, I told him I want to study mammals. And at that time, if you remember, we started studying civets in 2009. So when I joined, it was 2010, and he tasked me to study the diet of the common palm civet, which is a common species, but at the time we really do not know anything about it. So little did I know that I will have to be looking at civet poop, and yeah, the rest is history.
All right, thank you. So for our next questions, are drones being used to study animals dwelling in trees? Tze Kwan, would you like to share first?
For the civets, we are not using drones to study them, but we know that this is a technology that is currently being used by scientists around the world. Not only drones, so drones, they can you can fix a thermal camera on the drone so that you can actually survey for mammals that are dwelling on the trees. Yeah, I think it has been used for flying foxes. So Benjamin, would you like to share more about that? Or do you know any studies that's being done?
Yeah, so drones, I think we're still trying to figure our way out because sometimes they could be a bit intrusive unless you're using fixed-wing drones, which have been known to be used in studying, estimating the density of orangutan nests in Borneo. But also, I think there has also been a study published using automated recorders, bat detectors attached to drones to study bats at different heights. So that's an interesting study. But other than that, no, I've not studying using rotary drones in trees. Are tricky because you have to build your own drone because most of the commercial drones don't actually go very close to the tree for inspection. And if you have a drone that is next to a tree, it could be very intrusive for the animal. So so there are limitations.
Right. So our next question is about food. Just nice, it's almost lunchtime. So do our furry friends in the forest have enough food in the forest? Maybe Benjamin first.
I think the answer is yes, but there is no harm in having more. In fact, I think in our urban environment, especially and in our urban forests, we are doing planting as well. So some of these bats and even civets are using some of our more wooded parks for as a food resource, foraging.
Yeah. So yes, the civets have food in the forest. As we have learned from just now, I recorded more than 41 species of fruits in their diet, and also in the 1 million tree movement, the more tree species are being planted, and that includes the food plants of the civets, the bats, primates, and also the birds. So I think it is really great that more trees are being planted in Singapore, and also specially selected to identify these species that would provide more forest food resources for our animals.
Yeah, I think we can agree that there's enough food in the forest for our animals, and we're actually planting more fruit trees, but there's actually no need to feed them just in case we think that we can feed them to have more food. I think the quality of the food is much better from the forest than what we will be feeding them. And yeah, moving on to our next question. There seems to be more sightings of civets, and our viewers to know if there's actually a reason for it. Tze Kwan, would you like to take this?
Yeah, so there seems to be more sightings of the civets, but I think that could be due to two reasons. The first, I think it is the increased use of social media. So it is really easy to now use our phones to take photographs and upload the photos on our social media. And also, I think more importantly, it may be that now Singaporeans, people in Singapore are more aware of biodiversity in our midst. And I think it is really great. And so I think if you do see civets, do keep your distance, stay away from them, give them space, and if you have a photograph, do visit our Facebook page and share your sightings with us, as it can contribute to science. We often learn a lot about the civet behavior from photos and videos that members of the public have shared with us.
Now that you say this, I think there'll be even more sightings being reported.
Yes, and if you do see civet poop, do send your photos to us as well.
All right. So, do our bats and civets rely on trees in urban spaces, which is like outside of forested settings? Benjamin?
Yes, especially for I think not just fruit bats, but also our insectivorous bats and trees provide food for both groups of bats because they're also insects in trees. But I think increasingly we are also having a lot of we have discovered that the fruit bat feeds on both native and non-native tree species. So yeah, they do rely on trees in urban spaces, but they also have the forest to fall back on. Yeah.
Yeah, for the civets, yes, they are one of our last wild native urban carnivorans. So they do rely on trees in the urban space. And they are in our standard diet study in the urban environment, we also find them to feed on garden plant species such as the chiku, the golden shower, jambu. So if you would like civets to visit your place, you can plant some of these fruit trees. But if you would like to watch them from a distance, then you will also know to avoid planting these trees in your garden.
All right. Thank you very much for your sharing. I think that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you very much for being so generous and answering all our questions. Also, Amida, thanks.
Yeah. My pleasure.
Yeah.
And
Thank
also,
you for
Amida, thanks to our audience on Zoom and YouTube for joining us today. So with the 1 Million Trees movement and the City Nature Vision, we hope to involve more people in creating a greener city for us and also for our wildlife. You don't have to be a bat or civet to help with greening efforts. The night is still young and we have about 800,000 more trees to plant. So check out our website, TreesSG, and connect with us on NParks social media channel. You may scan the QR code here to join our mailing list if you would like to be more involved in our activities. Thank you all for your attention today, and we hope you have a great weekend ahead. Bye.